and especially Industry 4.0 manufacturing, I think women are becoming more and more part of this journey. And that's a transformation that we have seen. The third point I'd like to add is, yes, you're right, access to technology, access to data. And that is a big differentiator. So as a state, what we have now done is we have laid fiber network to home. This is BharatNet on steroids. So it's 15 Mbps of data, 250 channels, and free telephony. All this for under $2. And we have done this to every house, and on an Android TV box. So this opens up new opportunities to offer services to the citizens. So I think this is where the state can actually be a force multiplier and definitely integrate our citizens into this journey, rather than leaving it just to the private sector to lead the Industry 4.0.
Thank you very much, Minister Lokesh. I think clearly the state of Andhra Pradesh has been a leader in many ways in making technology an integral part of its state policy. So I'll come back to you on some of the points after we have heard from other speakers in the interest of time. So I next turn to our Honorable Minister Iswaran from Singapore. Singapore is clearly one of the global success stories, one of the case studies of successful use of technology for advancement of the country as a whole. What can India learn? What can we learn from the examples of Singapore?
Do I need to use this mic or I'm okay? All right. Thank you for the question. I think first, there are two big trends or big phenomena that we have to deal with. Globalization, something that we're all familiar with, and the other is the evolution in terms of technology. Do I need to do? Yeah,
it's a little bit better.
So globalization on the one side and technology and the evolution of technology on the other. Industry 4.0, and if you talk about frontier technologies like AI and so on, they're all basically developments related to technology. And in both cases, the key challenge is that there will be winners and there will be losers. When you talk about globalization, those companies, those individuals who are able to adapt to a globalized economy are going to be the winners. Those who are not able to adapt will be the losers. I don't think it's preordained that if you're a big company, you'll be successful, and if you're a small company, you won't. But it does mean that there will be those who win and those who lose. And in a way, technology, whether it's Industry 4.0 and AI, poses the same challenge. That you will have those who adapt and therefore are able to take advantage and benefit fully, and there will be those who won't. So I think from a government perspective, because I think your question was about the equitable element in this. And I think if governments want to address equity, then we have to, on the one hand, do we have a choice when it comes to globalization and technology? And from Singapore's perspective, the answer is no. You have to accept it, learn to adapt to it, and take advantage of it. Then the question is there any other thing that the government needs to do? And I think that is where governments need to invest. In tandem with any globalization effort and technology effort, governments need to invest in capability building within the population. In other words, investing in the training of the people to adapt to the new types of skills that are needed, and investing in the capabilities of their enterprises so that they can move into the digital realm and beyond. And so I think that's a key element here to try and mitigate the otherwise problematic divergence that you talked about. And I would add, just to echo Lokesh's point, it's not just the role of government, because I think enterprises, and I know we have some industrialists here, have to step up as well, because it means you need a new kind of compact as well with the workforce. Because it cannot just be that the enterprise optimizes for efficiency and leaves all the damage control to the government, because that's not a sustainable model.
Do I need to use this, or is my thing fine with the... Can you hear me if I speak without that? Yeah? Okay, good. So I'll leave it for the two ministers out here. So, I think you see some similarities in the approaches, but clearly the government leadership is very critical, the partnership is very critical. We will come back and explore them in more detail. In Singapore, some of you probably know this, I've heard about this. I think you're one of the first nations to have a nationwide sort of individual budget for lifelong learning, right? You just set that up. I'm interested to hear later how that is going. So let me turn now to a more perhaps India-specific focus. And at a general level, I turn to Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, who in his role as the DG of Indian Industry Confederation, how do you see, Chandrajit, the Indian industry reacting, partnering with the government to reduce inequality, leverage technology all at the same time?
Thanks, Shomitra. I just wanted to take up on one point that Minister Lokesh pointed out, and he mentioned about the workforce, and he talked about the relevance of workforce, the importance of workforce, and he also talked about women in the workforce. And one of the things that I've been picking up in this Davos is this entire focus of how industry across the world reacting to women's rights, so to say, and workforce engagement, and that cannot be completely ignored by any corporate at all. And again, in Davos, I just wanted to pick up another point which came up in various sessions across Davos this year, and I was making some notes. By 2030, as was pointed out in one of the sessions, AI would be $13 trillion of the global GDP by 2030. And very, very interestingly, another point which I was noting was the challenges of health and universal health, that is. And again, one of the things that we do look forward as to how do we really make this inclusive, NCD dialogues or precision medicine. So AI would be really in the forefront of all of this. And there will be 11 billion people in the world by 2050, and by 2030, dying would be optional. So that's all picked up from this Davos, by the way. So having said that, coming back to the more and this touches India very, very strongly, so to say. And having said that, I just wanted to look at the opportunities that India has today. And we talked about partnerships, and partnerships I think will be extremely important. The partnership between government and industry, the partnership between the center and the state, and I'm so glad to see the leadership of this being taken by a leading state of the country, and there are other states. Madhya Pradesh is also present over here. So there will be extremely relevant policy ecosystem which the states would have to dovetail to, and which should comply with whatever the larger ecosystem of at the central level that will come up. And to this, again, you talked about human, and I really want to focus on industry collaboration with academia, industry collaboration with institutes to see how we take advantage of the highest number of graduates that India produces, something around 80 million, which is across the world the highest. And also the second, or rather, in fact, we compete very closely to China with regards to the number of STEM graduates that we produce. So we have these to our advantage, but how do we use this advantage to really get industry collaborate to see that what Indian industry today needs when we talk about Industry 4.0 is really made available in the pipeline, so that the entire issue that we talk about jobs which will come up. And India is going to be, and my last point is, India is going to be one country where Industry 2.0, Industry 3.0, and Industry 4.0 will go along together. It's not just, it's Industry 4.0 and you chuck Industry 2.0 and Industry 3.0. So there has to be a sort of a thread which will have to run across. Today, other economies of the world have even moved ahead. And as you said, after Industry 4.0, you look at the AI, so to say, there is a lot of fuzziness between manufacturing and services. So jobs will come, may not be hardcore manufacturing. And as we say, modern manufacturing will be, and modern factory will be such where there will be one man and one dog. The man's job will be to give the dog the food, and the dog's job would be to keep the man away from the machine. So that's the challenge that we will face. And for that, the jobs will actually come, may not be from that hardcore traditional manufacturing that we talk about. And as the fuzziness increases, there will be offsets in the services side. So that's what I think the challenge of industry will be, to understand and stitch all of this together and work with all the other stakeholders concerned.
Okay. I like the dog and the man example, or dog and woman example. I think that's a wonderful one. But I'll come back to you later, CV, for are there specific examples that you can identify that are already happening in India on this front? So just think about that. I'll come back to you. But now let's get the viewpoints of some industry leaders. We have two industry leaders from India, and I would like to get their viewpoint on how they see themselves trying to address this question of equity, both inside and also in the society in which they operate. Mr. Mittal, perhaps you want to begin first in your role as also the president of CII.
Yeah, thank you. I think first of all, I must say that when we talk of equitable globalization or equitable growth, it is absolutely something which fits on India from any perspective we see. Given the demographic profile which we have. But just picking up from the last point which Chandrajit made, my view is that in the manufacturing sector there will be jobs, but the jobs profile will change. It is changing very fast. The technology disruptions is happening every 5 years. And that's a great challenge for India. How do we now talk to our academia to look at the curriculum where an engineering student, a medical student, when they complete their degree, they are actually online and on the go to what the demand is within the country and globally. Today, honestly, any engineering student from India will be at a loss after 5 years because the world would have moved. So that's the one point which I wanted to make. But before I go any further, I think 2-3 things which I want to talk about is on the opportunity which India gives. And I think that is important because that will ensure that what we are talking about an equitable globalization is leading to what India requires. The manufacturing is going to be $1 trillion by 2025, which means that we need to grow at a 12 to 15% annually only on the manufacturing side. If out of the 5 trillion, 1 trillion is going to be on manufacturing. The capex required will be $200+ billion in the next 7, 8 years. We all know India today is the third largest startup country in the world globally with 40,000 plus startups. But I think most important is where MNCs are now coming and set up base in India for data analytics, for their research, for machine learning, IoT, blockchain. And I think this is the strength of India, the software powerhouse which it is. And I will now go on to, when we talk of the equitable globalization, areas like data protection, areas like cybersecurity. I don't think one single country can come out with a solution for the world. We were in Singapore and met Minister Iswaran at that point of time, and the same point I made over there. How can countries now partner together on ensuring data protection, data security, cyber security? And the problems are going to be huge. The investments required will be phenomenal. But also when I look at equitable globalization from the India viewpoint, we have to make huge investment and significant investments in education, in skilling, in healthcare, urbanization. Prime Minister Modi launched the Ayushman Bharat, which is the largest healthcare scheme for about 500 million people. But for that to deliver that, this 4.0 technology is absolutely required to stitch the back end, to ensure that the beneficiaries get what they are wanting, to ensure that the data is available to the medical fraternity, what all needs to be done. And I'm sure once data is there, all of us know in the industry, that's like gold. You can come out with multifarious business models. Having said that, when we talk about India, the solutions have to be India-centric. We just cannot cut-paste the Western solutions and bring it to India. Because we need to understand, while there are large enterprises, there are large medium-scale enterprises who can afford to invest in technologies. There's a large base of population which needs the basics in a simplified way at the most cost-effective solution. Just think of a small businessman today who cannot invest into SAPs and the oracles of the world, but can use cloud for supply chain management, can use cloud for sharing data. Now, those are the things which India requires, and that's where I believe equitable implementation will ensure that we also look at equitable globalization. And by any chance, I'm not saying that all these solutions will come from within India. And this is where partnerships are going to be extremely important. And other thing which I keep harping with my friends from overseas, country after country, look at the scale of India. I mean, telecom today at less than $2. You for the month you call, 1 GB data every day is available. I mean, you can't even consume that, but it is available. And by the way, at the month end, it gets carried over. It doesn't sort of vanish in the cloud or thin air. Aadhaar cards, which is the unique identity program, 1.2 billion cards, identity cards have been issued. If I look at ordinary bank accounts which were opened under the Prime Minister's scheme, 350 million debit cards have been issued. I mean, look at the entire landscape which India is moving towards more digitization, more online, more, I would say, transaction which will happen online. So clearly, relevant solutions for India, partnerships with multifarious countries. And I know, I mean, Singapore has done exceedingly well on cybersecurity. I'm aware of that. Why do we need to reinvent the wheel? And as I said, and one size will not fit all. Similarly, one country cannot provide all the solutions. How can India lead the play while becoming the third largest economy in the world in the next 10, 15, 20 years? Being on the high table to ensure that we not only look at equitable growth or equitable dissemination of services, but also be a global leader on research, on innovation, and hand-in-hand work with companies all over the world. So I'll just stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you raised some very important questions about the need for scale. I think India is a country where clearly small initiatives are useful, but not really high impact. And second, the whole issue of speed. How do you actually ensure that things change fast enough? We have two more speakers and we hear from them. And then I want to introduce you into the dialogue. I can keep on asking questions out here, but what we'll do is we'll take one round of questions from you. So just prepare your questions. After our two speakers, I'll come to you and then we'll come back and have more discussions with panel members. So Mr. Banmali, what would you add to the perspectives?
Well, it's very tough to add after all that has been said. I think most of the points have already been made. But let me kind of just take a perspective of someone who's running a business on the ground. The first point I'd make is that while we talk about digitization, AI, and all that, there's also going to be a phase of transition. And I think we shouldn't be binary about kind of simply transporting ourselves from one age to the other without a transition phase. And I think managing this transition is going to be extremely crucial. Secondly, I'd say from an industry perspective as well, there is nervousness. There is, I think, to the point that was made about if you're a large industry, a large company, a very old business, the chances that you might fail and you might get disrupted are that much bigger and you might fall that much harder. If I just kind of take a look within our own group, businesses like steel, power, motors, and so on, these are all, we also see so much of transformation happening there that one just has to be alive to the fact that, you can be disrupted. So the point I'm making is that industry too is let's say, has its jitters in terms of how to be embraced. It's not just a question of all opportunity. The fourth point I'd like to make is that I think when we have to move ahead, and again, this point was made, the partnership between industry and government is absolutely critical. I don't think this can really be a game of winners and losers, I think, as has been mentioned, particularly in the context of India, where as it is you have such a wide gap between demand and supply. You overlay then maybe a further, a polarization of maybe data or any resource that you might be able to capture. I think it further simply accentuates the problem on hand. Therefore, the partnership with government, between industry and government, I think is absolutely going to be crucial. Needless to say, you mentioned the point about speed. I think that's very, very, very relevant. And of course, the trust element, which frankly, to my mind, needs to be at a much higher order than where we are today. The final point I'd like to make is that I think when we talk about Industry 4.0 and all of that, I think productivity, the gains of productivity, we need to figure out a way as to how are they passed on back to the consumer, as opposed to simply enriching the industry entirely. I think that equitable distribution of the gains of productivity, I think, would be very, very relevant. Let me just stop there and wait for the.
No, I think you raised some, again, very valuable additional points of trust. I think that's a very important recurrent theme. And also the distribution of the benefits. A classical example is that even though Uber is valued at whatever, tens of billions of dollars, a driver in Uber barely, makes subsistence, sort of minimum wage in the US. So it's really very difficult life for the drivers of Uber, even though the company as a whole apparently is doing quite well. Last but not least, Carol, what's your perspective?
Sure. I mean, I think it's been really fascinating and hugely warming, especially from an Indian-Singapore perspective, to really understand what the government is really trying to do to upskill and get their people ready for the future. I think a couple of points, really. First of all, the future is not something in the distance. The future is actually here today. And the pace of innovation is really, regulation can't keep up. And we're seeing that in a lot of different countries, that they're trying to regulate after the innovation has come into their country. And whilst that might slow down some of the innovation and some of the technology, it's not going to stop it at all. And, as technology gets commoditized and as everybody uses RPA and AI, the real differentiator is going to be your people. And I think, the biggest challenge and the biggest focus for governments and organisations and educators and individuals, actually, is around how do you instill this concept of lifelong learning. People entering the workforce today will have between 7 and 15 jobs in their lifetime. How do they equip and skill themselves to learn, to be agile and mobile and move around? And how do you as organisations tap into that talent? And I think, the one concept that I always try and kind of leave people with is we have to stop thinking of jobs as jobs. Every job has around 30 tasks, and not everybody's job is going to be disrupted 100%. So if you can dissect people's jobs into tasks, you go through a systematic process of can it be automated? If not, can it be augmented? If not, can it be offshored? If not, you start to then recreate a group of tasks that you truly need humans to do. And once you've identified those tasks, you really need to understand the capabilities you need to enable those humans to do those tasks. And that's how you then start to reframe and retrain your workforce. And it's interesting, we do a CEO survey at PwC every year, and we launched the 22nd one last night. And the top 3 issue for CEOs globally is the lack of available key talent to enable them to drive their business. And actually, 5 years ago, that was 50%, it's now 79%. So, nothing has really changed, and there's a real recognition and realization that if we can reskill and repurpose the people that we have, because quite often it's not a skill set issue, it's a mindset issue. And if we can look at people differently and look at jobs differently, I genuinely believe we can't protect jobs, but we can protect people. And if we skill people in the right way, we can give them a meaningful purpose in the future.
Thank you very much, Carol. I like the statement you made. You cannot protect jobs, you can protect people. I think the sense of urgency you brought into the discussion also, I think, is very useful and important. As I said, I'd love to open and involve you in the discussion. If you have any suggestions, comments, questions, my only request is just keep it brief and introduce yourself just briefly, your name and which organization you come from. Is there a microphone to go around, or do we just... Okay, just raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. So there's a question out here in the center. Can you please can you raise your hand, please? Otherwise you can't see. So raise your hand. Yes.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Krishna from Sweden. I'm an investor and a consultant. Because there are 2 key ministers.
Can you hold it closer to your mouth?
Yeah, there are 2 key ministers. One from the kind of the most developed world, and one from my own state. How do you really try to do with the emotional cost of inequality? Because in India, for example, we have the richest person whose house is estimated to be more than 1 billion, and it is also home to most of the poor people in the world. So this creates a social tension and loneliness. And I heard the UK has a minister for loneliness. So
that's true.
How can that be? Like
we need a minister for Brexit, I think, more than loneliness at the moment. But.
Okay, that's an interesting one. So, which one of you would like to take it first?
So I think that is where as a state we see a fine balance between welfare and development. We believe that welfare, targeted welfare, so that's very, very important. Targeted welfare can actually bring people out of the cycle of poverty. So historically, welfare has been abused politically. But in the state of Andhra Pradesh, thanks to technology, we're ensuring that welfare actually reaches the true beneficiary. And only then can you pull them out of poverty. And this has really worked in the state. If you take even agriculture alone, we have close to doubled farm income in the last 4.5 years, which has been a dream of India, and Andhra Pradesh got it done. So I think this is where we really need to work. We need to be very clear on what we need to deliver as a state and really ensure that the handout reaches it. And it's not just a handout and we forget. It's about how do you pull them out of that cycle. So I'll give you one example. We have this program where we're giving an unemployment benefit scheme to the youth of Andhra Pradesh. So it's very easy, I give them a monthly 1,000 rupee and I'm done. No. That's just the beginning. So what we're now doing is we're working with the private sector. We're sort of understanding what is the skill gap. Why are 500,000 youth in the state not employed? Where is the gap here? So we're taking this into our system. In some cases, the private sector is actually leading the training initiative, part funded even by the state. So I think this is where I believe that active engagement from the state will play a very, very important role.
Minister.
Let me just comment from a Singapore perspective. I stick to my core competence. But I would say this, I think the answer to your question is, I think income inequality has always been there. And if you want to overcome it, what you need is social mobility. In other words, every generation, a young person must feel that regardless of his or her background, regardless of whatever the family connections are or the wealth that's been accumulated, I, through my ability and my hard work, I have a crack at it. And if you can achieve that, and I think the achievement is both in the promise and in the delivery of the promise. I think if you can achieve that, then I think this emotional deficit you talk about can be ameliorated. Because then, yes, somebody is living in a very wealthy house or whatever, but you also know that I have a crack at it, if that is what motivates you and so on. So I think that's very important. And so in Singapore, one of the very basic tenets that we fiercely uphold is meritocracy. In other words, jobs and opportunities go to talent and proven ability.
I cannot help but ask you this question. Are you considering a minister of loneliness?
We're a very small place. Everybody runs into each other all the time.
Before coming here, I had a meeting with the Minister for AI for UAE. And listening to this comment about Minister of Loneliness is interesting, that talking about developing nations, UAE has a Minister of AI while UK has a Minister for Loneliness. We have a lady with a microphone. Yes, please.
Hello. I'm running Swiss Learning Exchange here in Switzerland, and I have been watching lovely stories coming out from Singapore, and my congratulations to you. These stories are very inspiring. And I have a question for you. How can we in Europe hear the stories that you're talking about? We don't hear them enough. And what work are you doing in that regard to reach your stories out to the European population who don't necessarily speak English?
For me or? Oh. I think Davos is a great opportunity for us to explain the Andhra model. But also I should thank the Honorable Minister from Singapore for supporting Andhra Pradesh. Because we're working very closely. And I think this is an example where partnership between an emerging economy and a developed economy together can really bring about transformational change. So what we have set out to achieve is what India has not accomplished since independence, which is to truly build a greenfield smart city. We're doing that. And yes, as a state, I think we're busy doing our work, and I believe that stories will catch up. It's just a matter of time, and I'm sure partners here from the CIA will actually help us. We actually discussed this morning that we need to document the work that's actually going in to do this amazing work. But I think it's an ongoing challenge.
If I could just add something to that, you walk down this lovely street, and the number of Indian or India-related sort of window panes is amazing. So it almost reminds me. I studied at Berkeley, in California, and now when I go back to Berkeley, University of Shattuck Avenue, which is the main avenue out there, is filled with shops selling Indian saris. It's amazing. But so I think India. I would argue, in fact, slightly differently. I would say that India's brand outside is, in fact, very positive. And Indians have somehow, so the effort of the industry, effort of the government, the yoga thing that Prime Minister Modi leads, or Bollywood, and all this combination actually has given a positive image to India. Of course, more can be done, but I think India's image is very positive right now compared to often the reality inside. So I think there's an interesting issue, but I was wondering whether on the brand India you would like to add
if I may,
something.
I just want to pick up on two things which we just heard. I think first of all, with the young population, India doesn't need a minister for loneliness. These are the aging economies, and probably I think Brexit is putting more pressure on the UK system. Having said that, I think Minister Iswaran made a very valid point here: the emotional quotient, and we Indians are highly emotional. That I can tell you. My company is amongst the largest skilling company in India, and we skill about 200,000, 250,000 every year. The challenge which I have always faced is, while we have jobs on the left hand, and the skilling we do according to that, the people don't want to move out of their village homes. They say, please bring the job here. So therefore, the challenge is, how can we use this entire 4.0 technologies to upgrade the agri sector, the farming sector, and find jobs which are relevant to a large diversity across India. I think that is extremely important, because it's not only just moving from one place to the other. Your food habits. I mean, one is you are staying with your parents, your kith and kin, that continues in villages. In the urban India, the mobility is a given. I mean, young professionals, they move very freely. So I think these are the, if I may say, the logistics challenge we have. These are the challenges where we need to look at we are using drones now for agriculture, but it's very selective. We need to take it beyond that. We need to come out with solutions which only just not tells me what is going to be the weather for the next 7 days, my soil health, my effective water management. So all these things, once you start looking at, there will be micro enterprises in the rural areas where the farmers or farming families will become entrepreneurs, will become job givers rather than job seekers. So I just wanted to make that point.
I want to just get your perspective on this notion of brand India, because I think it's very important, because India comes from a relatively, let's say, developing nation kind of a background. And at the same time, India has a very positive image. So what are you doing from the Industry Confederation, or Tata, for example, is a global brand right now? So any comments that you'd have on that?
So I'll talk about what we are doing with the Tata.
Okay, great. So then even better.
One of the partnerships that we sort of probably not missed out, probably didn't find a major mention, is partnership with the small and the medium companies. And that's a very important piece in this entire work that we are doing on Industry 4.0. 10 years back, when we used to talk to a group of small industries as an industry organization in India, or 10 or 15 years back, the major complaint used to be finance, technology, marketing challenges. Today, if you talk to them, they talk about next practices and skilled manpower as a huge transformation that they are all talking about, they don't get, and they need the next practices. So the Tatas have been supporting us, and we have in a very big way, and we've launched a center for digital transformation, which is actually helping build capacities in the small and medium enterprises of India. It works out of the NCR in Gurgaon, and that's actually helping build capacity in the small medium companies to get folded into, to work with the larger companies in this work on Industry 4.0. You talked about brand, and we talk about, one of the brand statements that we make, and we've talked proudly about the number of graduates, STEM graduates, etc., which I talked about in my opening remarks. But coming to that, what we are trying to do is to, again, work with institutions to see how we are able to create a band of train the trainers program, and getting into these academia and institutions of excellence, and seeing where we can create this band, which in turn will actually help us scale and transform these STEM graduates, transform the number of graduates. That we have the numbers, but how do we really project the excellence in these? The STEM graduate, how much are they productive? What could be their productivity? So the work is really on to see that while we have the numbers, how we can also improve on the quality through this intervention of train the trainers and such programs.
Would you like to add something to it? Or?
Well, just a quick word. I think just from a business perspective, just to make sure that excellence is right at the top, and not just excellence within the Indian confines, because there's a large enough market, there's large enough demand. You can, in principle, run a business just based on that, but it has to be global in nature. And I think the moment the world realizes that, well, XYZ group is globally the best in whatever they do, I think it builds a certain brand and so on. The second I'd make, in the context of an emerging market and an emerging economy, I think the purpose of the business gets to be extremely crucial. I would argue that in Industry 4.0, for all companies, the purpose of the business has never been tested as it is being tested now. And I think if we can kind of articulate that, explain that, stand for that, my sense is, it'll be a different way of looking at business, entrepreneurship, and the larger good.
Good. Question, please. Yeah.
I really want to thank you for, as moderator, for making a very important comment in your opening remarks.
Added my value. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well done.
And that was how Industry 4.0 is actually offsetting by adding jobs and not just reducing jobs. Because that is one evidence we tend to ignore, the additions that are happening in allied services. And this morning, actually, me and Health Secretary of Andhra Pradesh, we sat down to calculate how many jobs have we added in the state of Andhra Pradesh using automation in healthcare delivery. And the number is in 2.5 years, 20,381 jobs. Wow. And what we are talking about is all automation, teleophthalmology, teleradiology. I mean, when you hear about them, you think that they would replace jobs. But these 20,381 jobs and 800 more getting added this month wouldn't exist but for automation. And I think this pool of evidence of job addition needs to come out at the forefront so that a lot of apprehensions of job loss in Industry 4.0 is neutralized and taken positively.
You're absolutely right. And we all certainly hope that this job addition stays true in the next 50 years also. It stayed true in the last 50 years. To make sure that it stays true in the next 50 years, we have to do a lot of different things in society, industry, government, and so on. Yes, please.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments. I think you're right. It creates new jobs, but they create different kinds of jobs.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
And so it's not a one-for-one substitution. Mm-hmm. And I think, therefore, you need to invest in skills. And I think the point of manufacturing, just to share with you, like in Singapore, manufacturing in absolute dollar terms has grown. Its value-add contribution to our GDP. It's about 20% of our GDP. But its employment share has actually come down.
Yeah.
And the capital you need to create a manufacturing job, at least in our context, has grown significantly. We used to be able to create one manufacturing job for $10,000, $15,000 of capital investment. Today, you need 100,000, and in some cases, $500,000 to $1 million, depending on the kind of sector. So the point is, you shouldn't underestimate that. Yeah. I think the power of job creation is there, but the recognition that you need to bridge the skills gap and the transitions have to be managed well.
I think that's an excellent point. Thank you, Minister, for that. We have one last question, and then we'll have to wrap up here.
Thank you so much. This is Mohan Krishna from IT Profound USA. I have one question regarding Industry 4.0. What is the woman role in Industry 4.0, where they're all educated well, that raised to 46% in 2014 in India alone, but only 3% are working in the engineering sector, whereas 12% working in the computer sector. So how government is actually pushing these numbers high?
So this is an excellent theme to, in fact, close the session also. And maybe I'll begin with you, Carol, and then I'll come to the government perspective. Carol, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I have an interesting perspective on this because I think we are starting to make progress around diversity in the workforce, not nearly as quickly as we need to. And a lot of that is because organisations really struggle to think about the composition of their workforce and create flexibility within that in some way, shape or form to really attract the people that don't necessarily want to work on a 9-to-5 type environment. My fear for Industry 4.0 is that we do not have enough women going into STEM. We do not have enough women being attracted to go and do STEM type degrees, and my fear is that actually the result is going to set us back, not take us forward, unless we work together with governments and organisations to really create a conscious effort, one, to get more women into doing STEM type degrees, but two, to create more flexibility within our environment to allow people to work, to harness the talent.
Minister?
I think this continues to be a challenging area. I think change is not fast enough in this area. As a state, we see a very interesting cross-section at you. 4.0 is about both software and hardware. And, India's consumption of IoT devices is just going off the roof. So Andhra is playing a very important role in the manufacturing of these products. This is where we've seen amazing transformation. You'll be surprised, in the Foxconn facility in Andhra Pradesh, 18,000 women work in 3 shifts. Close to 90% of the workforce in Foxconn India is women. And I was in this session, for me it was truly eye-opening session. 1,500 women, and we're just interacting. And people from different part of the state were there. So I think definitely manufacturing in the context of Industry 4.0 is really helping us bridge the gap. But it's also a function of labor reforms. And as a state, we're the first state to actually bring the reform where women can work across 3 shifts. The safety of women is guaranteed by the state. Of course, Andhra Pradesh is a very safe state. So given that, with this reform, Brandix, which manufactures products for Victoria's Secret, is now employing close to 27,000 women in the northern part of Andhra Pradesh. So I think these are great examples, and I'm sure in India there are very few. But I think this is just the beginning. Definitely, I do believe women are more disciplined than men. So no second thoughts about that. And Industry 4.0, I think they'll play a very, very important role. And as a state, we're very conscious about this. And women empowerment starts at home. So, and our Chief Minister knows that. So we are very conscious about that.
I would like to get the perspective of other panel members on this important. Minister Ishwaran, would you like to add a few comments? You don't have to, but if you'd like to.
Lokesh has made some very provocative assertions, but anyway, I'll let that pass. But I think one thing I would say is when you talk about all this Industry 4.0 and the other technology developments, actually they are creating jobs that, if at all there were any traditional sort of job characteristic barriers for women to participate in the workforce, in fact, these new era of jobs have hardly any of those limitations. And in fact, they are far more accessible for women. So I agree, actually the main thing is ensuring that women have got the requisite STEM or technical skills base. That's what is key. And there somehow seems to be a bifurcation based on the data I've seen and so on. Somewhere in high school, the boys tend to start to gravitate towards STEM, and for whatever reason, the girls tend to gravitate a different way. And there's no real reason ex ante. I don't think the brains are wired differently or whatever. So, but I think the key point here is we need to make an investment. There's an example in Israel. in cybersecurity. And Israel has a very high proportion of women working in cybersecurity, which is completely a bit counterintuitive when you look at examples around the world. And one of the reasons is because they make an active intervention in high school at the early level to engage the young students, the female students, and interest them in this and get them to be involved in it. So you got to start early in that way, and I think it's something that's very achievable, and I think the kind of jobs being created are very accessible.
Any comments on this theme from other panel members? Chandrajit, do you want to add something?
No, I just wanted to say that the role of industry is extremely important in this, and I think one of the things that we try to propagate is voluntary codes and voluntary practices, best practices, which we sort of try to share on some of the actions taken by individual companies or even cluster of companies. I was fortunate to be invited to speak to speaking to one particular company, a British company, which is into high-end manufacturing in India, and they have made India a second home of theirs. And they had asked me to address their workers in a particular state and a backward district in a particular state. And I went there, and to my surprise, 67% of that workforce on the shop floor were girls. And the managing director of that company, who's an Indian, was explaining when he was trying to recruit girls on the shop floor, the major pushback came from the families of their people, and the girls said that no, we will. And in majority of the cases, they were single breadwinner for the family. And once they started doing it, yes, governmental regulations need to play a role, like they were in night shifts in a factory premises. And when they did that, there was a huge encouragement in terms of saying that, yes, this model has worked. And today, the company is making another investment in India. Again, repeat, it's a foreign company in India, which is making another investment, and they want to replicate because they say it's much better to work with Indian women in the shop floor. And so there are certain great examples. It's just that we need to take these examples, populate these examples, share them, and the richness that they brought in their shop floor, where they have actually, this is a yellow company, which is manufacturing earth-moving equipments.
That's a wonderful example.
Samitra, may I
yes,
comment
please.
on
I was
this?
going to come to you also, yes.
I think there are 2 or 3 data points which need to be looked at. One is the government intervention on policy reform. Women can't work in a second shift or third shift. That itself becomes a barrier. I think we need to look at changing this dynamics from the very beginning. I'm happy that Andhra has gone for 3 shifts for women working, and that really helps them. The second is, if you see electronics manufacturing, you'll see more women on the shop floor. If you see textile, you'll see women in the. If you see agriculture, you'll see more women there. And I can tell you without a doubt, girls will always work much better than men. We have too many, diversions in life. And let me also share the data point with you. When a woman earns $1, 95 cents go back home. When a man earns $1, only 55 cents go, because we do many other things where we waste the money. Having said that, when we are talking of future technology now, engineering, when we talk of STEM and engineering, we look at the old age engineering, where you need to do physical labor, more hard work. Though that era is gone. When we are looking at future technologies, I have no doubt why women cannot be getting ready for that. If you see medical fraternity, you see lady doctors. You see them working 24/7, anytime, every time, you see them. So I think that is one. The last point which I want to make here is, and that's the India problem, we have to change our mindsets. I can tell you, when I started doing my farming, we employed men and women, and for the first time, we gave the same wage to a man and a woman in the farm labor. And once I go into visiting one of the places, and I see few men just whiling away time. And I said, why are they not working if you're paying them? So I called the partner farmer. He says, well, they've just finished off their work. I said, then they should go home. Why are they doing all this thing? He says, the problem is their wives work here. They earn the same money. They go after 2 hours because she has to go and cook food, otherwise they'll have to go and help them. Now this is the Western world where, there's an equitable thing. You will see in India it is still, even if you are working, you have to get me my breakfast, you have to come and make dinner for the family. So those mindsets also need to change. I'm just trying to, give you the entire landscape.
Yeah, that's true. So you have the pleasure and the honor of the last word.
Just not the last, but just on this subject, I think while we talk about women on the shop floor and the workforce and so on, I think in leadership as well, we need to have not just adequate, but maybe more than adequate representation just to make up. And I think that, to the point that the minister made earlier, I think that needs some decided intervention, meaning you've got to set your mind to doing it and not kind of live with the excuse that, there aren't enough candidates and so on and so forth. I think if you set your mind to doing it, you will achieve it. It's been our experience that you can do it, and I think that's something we need to focus on as well.
So I think what was very nice to hear is a very common optimistic theme on this very important issue of gender. So thank you for raising it. We're coming towards the end of the panel, and in a few minutes I'll let you free to attack the food. Being a moderator, there are sort of 3 phases of the task. So one is the opening statement, the second is the moderation, the third is the closing statement. The opening statement is easy. You can say pretty much whatever you want and launch the discussion. The middle moderation is a little bit more complex, but it usually runs well if you've got great speakers and a great audience like the case. So thank you for that. The closing is the hardest. And as a moderator, that's the worst part of the job. And in this case, we had a colleague from PwC who volunteered for the job. So how could I refuse that offer? So we'll have a very eminent consultant, partner from PwC, summarizing for us the panel discussion. So you're on the spot.
Thanks, Soumitra, for putting me in a spot. I think I would say a wow. That's what happens when you pack several hundred years of experience on a panel and give them an hour to talk about. I think for me and for a lot of people over here, I think there are 3 key takeaways from a session like this. If we really want to drive equality, I think the governments would need to lead the whole adaptation of technology, and government will have to lead it through a lot of partnerships. Towards the end, we have actually a good example today with Hitachi, which is a forefront of technology, signing a MOU with AP State, which is a leader of technology and in terms of the way government has been working. I think the second key piece in this discussion was about inclusivity. And the inclusivity has several dimensions. So one, we spoke about women, how to make it more inclusive for women in the workforce. But this is also about various firms, which is about how do we use technology for bringing medium, small, and even upcoming companies in the foray, and even countries in the foray. So that's where the second part comes in. And the third part of this discussion was about people. And as somebody said, that we need to protect people over protecting jobs, and that becomes the central piece. So those are the 3 key takeaways in terms of kind of summarizing this. I hope I've done a good job on that part. But before we kind of close with all these people here, a big thank you to all of you with the kind of inputs to a lot of policymakers over here. Thanks for saying yes on this. And very quickly, we want to sign a MOU with Hitachi and Hitachi President. Thank you very much for coming in here. So Mr. Bharat Kaushal is the MD of Hitachi, and Mr. CEO Krishna Kishore sir, if we can exchange the MOU. This is about it's just a 2 minutes thing. Yeah, we'll just do it in front of, yeah. yeah, just 2 minutes thing.
India is witnessing a rapid socio-economic metamorphosis as an outcome of the ubiquitous social innovation initiatives by the government, envisioned with the citizen at the very epicenter. While Make in India has bolstered the nation's indigenous manufacturing capability and purged it on the path of Industry 4.0, Power for All, with an emphasis on solar energy, has helped millions of citizens illuminate their homes and transform their lives. Digital India initiatives have provided the framework to continuously evolve and improve the governance for all citizens. Hitachi has been a committed partner to the government in this journey. Through social innovation business, Hitachi is collaborating with the policymakers to enhance the citizen's life cycle comprehensively by repurposing the critical sectors of education, healthcare, agriculture, and governance. Partnering the government's vision of future-enabled India, Hitachi MGRM Net is co-creating solutions that are built on extensive groundwork of research, reach, and emerging technologies to provide the right balance between internal organizational efficiency